Remember Peter Pan, the story of the boy who never ages? That's who you are. I mean, think about it. Peter Pan is the ultimate story of the one who fears and avoids sacrifice. He's magical because all children are magical. They're nothing but pure potential. They can be anything they want if they lived out to their future, and yet they're currently nothing. Peter Pan doesn't want to give that potential up, so what does he do? He becomes the king of Lost Boys. A group of orphans that have nothing going for them. The only adult around is Captain Hook, and he's the villain that's been chasing the Lost Boys, running from TikTok the crocodile that has a clock in its stomach. It already took Captain Hook's arm, but it's infatuated with consuming the rest of Captain Hook. And that's representative of what time does to a person. The childlike innocence is eaten away, and the suffering of reality can turn you into a contemptuous and corrupt person that despises anything that reminds them of that failure of theirs, that wasted potential. Most importantly, when you're in Neverland, you forget where you came from. Peter Pan says the Lost Boys are all orphans, but we know that's not entirely true. Wendy and her brothers became part of the Lost Boys whilst forgetting about their life back home. They weren't orphans. They were lured away from their parents and forgot about it in Neverland, until later conversation jolts their memories back, which begs a question on Peter Pan's intention. And the written novel of Peter Pan is far darker and concerning than the Disney version I'm talking about, but that's for another time. This magical boy that never ages enters the realm of the real world and takes a girl by the name of Wendy along with her brothers to Neverland, an island where they'll never age. They can run away from their parents, from expectations, from all their responsibilities. This is representative of escapism in its ultimate form. In other words, Pleasure Island. And as the story progresses, Peter Pan has to let Wendy go back to reality, and instead of going with her, he chooses to stay in Neverland with Tinkerbell, a woman who doesn't even exist. Representative of the epitome of lust, a primal urge that draws a curtain over the rational mind, a filthy path decorated to seem pretty, driving itself as a primary gateway to degeneracy. That's why Peter Pan stays back. You are the boy who never ages, that boy that's too afraid to sacrifice and instead stays in Pleasure Island, their comfort zone. You know you should leave, but Tinkerbell whispers you back. The dopamine hit from scrolling social media, playing video games, and eating fast food and watching pornography. It's all so enticing. These are your Lost Boys after all. You are their king, their leader. You make sure you're spending time with them every single week, if not every single day, don't you? Let this video be a wake-up call for you. In order to break free from this destructive cycle, to free yourself from Pleasure Island, there is one fundamental concept you must understand and execute. That concept is sacrifice. To achieve something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. In other words, if nothing changes, nothing changes. By the end of this video, I'm sure the weight of your lost potential will burden on you so heavily that you will want nothing more than to live out the idea of sacrifice. I say this not only through experience, but evidence as well. I'm no psychiatrist to dub anything the cure of addiction, but the evidences are something that you will see to be inescapable, because life is inherently sacrificial. Just as I mentioned at the start of the video, you are all in. There is nothing you can do to back out. As much as you've been avoiding sacrifice, you are guaranteed to experience it. It is likely that before you die, you will see the death of anything and everything you loved. Your mother that raised you and gave up her childhood dreams to live out yours. Your father that labored whether he got sleep or he couldn't due to the stress of raising a family and putting food on the table. Your siblings that you've known all your life. Your friends that have accompanied you through thick and thin. Your partner that you would give everything up for. They will all be sacrificed. Either you die or you watch them die. All unfolding step by step right in front of your eyes. This is the unfortunate guarantee of life, and that's just the reality. So pick your sacrifice or become the sacrifice. Consumption is endless, but life isn't. So it's about time we take back control. One minute can change an hour. 1 hour can change a day. 1 day can change a week. 1 week can change a month. 1 month can change a year. And 1 year can change your entire life. Your actions may seem small right now, but they're part of something bigger. It's ultimately your choice. Are these actions going to rebuild your life, or are they going to destroy it? Many people know this as the butterfly effect, or more broadly, the domino effect. That one small change in a long enough period of time can bring about monumental revolution. And when you understand this, all of a sudden the present moment isn't so lighthearted. That these few minutes of my life are capable of redirecting the entirety of my existence? It's baffling to think about. And you might feel your heart pulsing for change. Your body is looking to move, but hold on to it until the end of the video where I give more practical steps to take. Another thing to understand over here is how human behavior is cyclical. When you break patterns of behavior and do something good, you are more likely to do something good. And if you do something bad, then you are more likely to do something bad afterwards. Our behavior moves in these cyclical patterns. This is why mornings and nights are so crucial for setting the tone. Just a few scrolls on social media in the morning could set off cortisol, make you just impulsive enough to move on to the next dopaminergic activity, such as eating sugary food in the morning. Now diving deeper into the dopamine hole, you scroll through social media longer while stuffing your face, becoming a zombie that is now hunting the next dopamine hit for the rest of the day. It was just those few seconds in the morning that trapped you into this entire cycle to begin with. Imagine how the rest of your day would have been if the first few seconds of your day were to remember God and your purpose. You'd strive yourself to do what's righteous, such as prayer and exercising and stretching, setting you up to sustain focus instead of worsening your attention span even further than it already is. Therefore, you would be able to get hours of work done to inch closer to your goals. A few seconds of difference can very well shape your entire day, and this cyclical nature of our behavior will allow those changes to spiral you upwards, reaching new heights and limits your past self would never even dream about. And being sensitive to this concept is one of the most important awakenings you may experience. Everything matters, so take it seriously. And after listening to this, a part of you might begin to think, this sounds a bit extreme. So anytime I have fun, I'm supposed to think that this is a gateway to self-destruction? Am I a robot that's supposed to live the most perfectly disciplined life? That every second is meant to be spent in perfection? That I'm not capable of balancing my own pleasure and productivity? And the answer to that is no. You're not supposed to live like some perfect robot. I only brought this concept up to awaken you to the sensitivity of your actions. I didn't call for you to perfect them. However, one thing I will say is that the battle between leisure and work is much more dangerous today than ever before in human history. This is because back in the day, leisure was spending time in nature and with family. The modern avenues of leisure, such as social media and video games, are technologies that are so severely addicting, neuroscientists and psychologists compare them to hard drugs when it comes to its release of dopamine. When you say you want to balance your life with some fun, play video games here and there, scroll on social media for an hour a day, nothing much, this is a delusion and you know it. Even people that many consider the representation of discipline, such as Andrew Tate, complained how he got sucked into social media without even knowing, even though he rarely opens it in the first place. He felt almost as if he had no free will or choice. So ask yourself, how often do you cross the boundaries you set on these fun activities? You'll quickly realize that it almost always comes down to an ultimatum. You either quit it altogether or you enjoy it, slowly overstepping boundaries until you fall into the addiction once more, trying to regain control and balance in life, only to relapse again and again. This is the case with these modern technologies that are supposedly there to wind off or pass some time. There is no balance. You either sacrifice them or you yourself become the sacrifice. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you delete your video games and delete social media accounts and wipe them all away, but at the minimum, make them inaccessible when you know other things must be done. I lock my phones away or put them in a faraway area in my mornings because I know that these are my most important hours to set myself up for the rest of the day. I engage in my deepest work and complete my most difficult tasks during this time. Then after that, I schedule in times where I can pick up my phone and check through emails, notifications, and maybe even scroll through social media. However, even my social media is scheduled and intentional. I made my feed consolidate me Islamic reminders, video editing techniques, and aesthetic filmography in order to use it for content creation and understanding the consumer market deeper. With all this being said, there is one habit that embodies all of these advices, and that habit is waking up early. Because our conception of productivity tells us that we need the whole 7.5 hours, even if it means waking up late. But that's not what productivity is about. There are degenerates out there that sleep 8 hours, and then there are geniuses that sleep 4 hours. It's not entirely biological either, since genetic dispositions for sleep don't vary that much. It truly comes down to obsession. Everyone hates waking up in the mornings, me included, but that's one of the reasons why I consistently do it. It's less about the biological efficiency than it is about the psychological rewiring. And I take it a step further and go for a run after Fajr. And I hate kept running. Why all of this torture, you might be asking me? Well, it's because it brings certainty in a world of uncertainty. If only one single slip of mine is a potential to relapse into old habits and addictions, I need to set a standard. I need routine, because then I have something to gauge myself instead of putting on blinders, waking up late, going on my phone, and then telling myself, it's not a big deal. Because the truth is, it is a big deal. And without these standards, we lose direction and fall to our lower autonomous self. And I would prefer never to let that happen ever again. I will take this seriously as if my life depends on it, because it just might. Adopting responsibility requires voluntary sacrifice, but that's what gives you meaning. There are people out there that live like crooks or absolute losers with no ambition for life. Then they adopt responsibility and they switch like nothing else. Having a newborn child, for example, you would stop doubting all the time. You would forget the daydreaming because you're just worried if your baby is okay. So we learn from this that if we truly want to find meaning in the suffering that plagues our life, we shouldn't hesitate to offer the ultimate sacrifice. And that's a core message of the Quran too. Often in metaphysical imagery, but sometimes literally as well. We see it in the story of Habil and Qabil and how they offered sacrifice, and only the ultimate sacrifice from them was accepted. Ibrahim alayhi salam's story is all about sacrifices as well. Adopting responsibility and becoming truthful are things that the prophets did before Nubuwwah. And then these traits were exemplified by Allah's tests after they became Nabi. That's why the prophets were the greatest in sacrifice. And what happens when you voluntarily sacrifice things you love and desire? You are no longer tortured by conscience, though you will be tortured by fate. In the case of being tortured by conscience, the burden of existence weighs heavy and your thoughts run into a frantic spiral to hopelessness, despite favorable circumstances. This is something we see with celebrities who have fame, money, status, everything that you would imagine makes a person happy. Yet they resort to drugs to help them sleep at night and another dose to keep them awake in the morning until they're driven mad into a suicidal ending. They take nothing with them to the grave. No money, no fame, no status. They have been tortured not by their fate, which seems pretty favorable, but they've been tortured by their conscience. On the other hand, you see people that have been absolutely tortured by fate, waking up to the news of a terminal illness leaving them with weeks, if not days to live, or others that wake up to bombs incinerating their entire family, mothers losing children, husbands losing wives, and children losing their parents. Yet a sense of serenity is shown on their faces as they cry from their loss but continue moving forward. They continue resisting against the suffering of life. Suicide is not a thought that crosses their mind as they drag themselves to the next step, grab their broken leg and yank it one step even more, moving forward slowly but surely. These are people that have been tortured by fate, but not by conscience. They have attained peace in conscience, all because they sacrificed what they loved. If you can bring yourself to not be tortured by conscience, then the torture of fate begins to feel more like an adventure instead of a catastrophe, and you can truly begin to appreciate life. You can begin to conjure future representations of yourself. You can ask yourself how these representations success or fail. Do this enough times and you will find a future where you actually succeed in a manner you want to, determining for yourself, because of your undue suffering, which elements of your pathetic self that you need to let go, and that will bring you clarity on what actions you need to take. I hope you're still taking notes, because there's another outcome to sacrifice, which is truthfulness. If you tell yourself, I'm going to act as if being truthful will lead me to enlightenment, that I'm going to act as if I'm going to pursue the deepest path of life, you'll find that there are reasons not to do so. So it's a decision that you have to make. And one thing that will help you on this path towards truthfulness is to get rid of the ums and the oohs and the ahs, getting rid of unnecessary pauses in speech, getting rid of everything you say to impress people, and see if you can only speak what you truly believe. Now, in order to even find out what your true beliefs are requires a great deal of sacrifice on its own. Because you might have been living life like the student who wrote what the professor wanted to hear to get an A-grade paper. Yeah, I'll write some pro-feminist, left-wing stuff so the professor doesn't get mad. You thought it was just for the grade, but you didn't know what it began to do to your own belief system. Speaking the truth is much more difficult than we can imagine. And if you're not speaking the truth, then you need to ask yourself, what's talking over here? Is it your experiences, your reptilian mind, your desires, your fears perhaps? How do you know what's coming out of your mouth isn't utter lies masquerading in authenticity? And when you ask these questions, you can understand how the things you own begin to own you. Those things that you love so much plague your conscience, and you cannot tell your beliefs apart from one another. And some people say, well, that's okay. I don't want to know my true self. It's deep and dark. This material gratification can speak for me. I don't need to orient myself to truthfulness for the greater good. But however sufferable their life is, however deep it is, however much of that suffering is caused by the malevolence of other people, however much of that suffering is caused by life itself, none of it justifies turning away from good. And whoever violates that idea violates themselves, and they find themselves in the position of Qabil, a position known as long as human history, the position of a man who is given a punishment too great to bear. I really hope you took notes of all of this, because you can save other people just by being able to convey the same message. Said is really aimed at pushing you to act, to sacrifice the things that are controlling you, the things you desire so deeply, instead of artificial attempts at sacrifice, where you're trying to balance your desires with your dreams. The analysis of the story of Peter Pan that I gave at the beginning of this video makes addiction psychology digestible for the average person, which is recognizing yourself as the boy who refuses to grow up, hiding in the allure of Neverland, a place filled with illusions, distractions, and instant gratification, which is mirroring our relationship with our escapes through social media, video games, and fast food. Always telling ourselves that we can balance our life with leisure, only to be lured into mind-numbing addictions once more. Real balance requires sacrifice, then intentionality behind the use of such vices, such as scheduling and time, setting standards, and creating routines, all in order to protect yourself from mindless indulgence, bringing order to the chaos. The butterfly effect that I mentioned earlier teaches us that the smallest of changes just might nudge us into the right direction, and over the span of a year, that little nudge can become life-changing. It reminds me of the quote, "The chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they are too strong to be broken." And I've never really found a truer statement regarding addiction. And this makes every moment feel extremely heavy all of a sudden. And I want to use this feeling to drive you into a sacrifice followed by a singular habit. The sacrifice is what you love most to consume. If it's video games, push yourself to delete it. If it's social media, delete the app, or better yet, your account altogether. If it's fast food, then make a meal prep plan, do groceries, and spend tonight cooking. All of these things might sound insane, but as they say, fear is a mile wide but an inch deep. All of that fear you have around sacrificing the thing you love, being left out and not being able to lean on it to escape reality, it might feel intense, but once you follow through with the sacrifice, you'll realize it really wasn't that bad. In fact, life has become much more enjoyable than you would have imagined. Following this sacrifice is the habit, which is waking up early. And if you can pair it with a run, that will be phenomenal as well. I'll link a video by Dr. K in the description when it comes to sleep and fixing your schedule, but please don't let your future self down by not following through with the action steps. Regret is one of the most painful emotions. Trust me. The price of freedom in this dystopian era you were born into is a high price, but it's worth it. And with that being said, I want to thank you for reaching to the end of the video. If this video was of benefit, then share it with your friends. Copy the link and just send it in the group chats. If you want to see more of this, then consider subscribing. And as you leave this video, remember, the power to shape your life lies in your hands. Pursue truthfulness and commit to sacrifice. In doing so, you'll find a future where you succeed in a manner that aligns with your deepest values and aspirations. You're all in after all. Why not make every moment count?